Hi, I'm Trout. I'm here today just to share a game I found. I wanted to do a little review. Maybe I'll do more in the future. I don't know. It's just for fun right now. Basically, today I want to talk about this little indie game I found. It's called Pale Abyss. It's by Permanent Crab Studios, and just had a lot of fun with it, and it's just the demo right now. The demo covers about an hour and a half of gameplay. So, starting with our story, our narrative, there's not too much to talk about here, unfortunately. The only present NPC is a narrator or disembodied voice that kind of shows up in a beginning cutscene, and you don't really see your player character or anything either. So there's not too much there. The narrator does give some backstory on the world. I'll let the narrator explain that to you real quick. I do think the lack of story outside of this little narrator thing is a consequence of it being a demo. It'll probably be fixed in the final game, so I don't want to knock too many points off for that. In terms of story, there's not much of a score to really give yet. So let's talk about the visuals, the audio, the style. The term that I think is correct for the style, and I had to do a little bit of research and still didn't find a definitive answer, is a low poly pixelated 3D style. And what that means is the models, like the character and enemy item, everything models are fairly low poly, like you'd see in like a PlayStation 3 game, and everything seems to have this filter on it. All of the textures are done with pixel art, and there seems to be some sort of filter on it that pixelates everything beyond that. Unfortunately, the stylistic choices do make some things further away hard to see, but when the really important thing that's far away and you need to see is really big, I don't think that's too big of an issue. I do think that the low poly style and those pixelated graphics do really help to kind of bring out the dark, gloomy atmosphere that they're going for while still keeping colors kind of vibrant. It's really cool, really well done. The music is something I can't really get enough of. They released the OST on their Steam. They got links to it and stuff, and I'm gonna be listening to that for a while. Right as you open the game, it starts blasting that music, so I did have to turn it down a little, but it just doesn't stop with the quality. The only audio issue would be that sometimes it just kind of stops and it seems random, and then turns out going to a new area gives you new music, which means there's like There's like 4 different soundtrack, maybe 3, maybe 5. The combat itself is fairly basic. You've got a weapon, you can swing it, you do a charge and attack. You don't have a dodge, but you do have a jump. It's not super useful in combat, but it gets a lot of momentum. You've got 2 spots to have a spell equipped and charge to cast them. In the demo, there were only 2 spells available, one of them being Abyss themed and one Occult themed. Now, Abyss and Occult is the 2 damage types, or 2 of 3 damage types, really. There's one, the basic attacks, which don't really have much to say. It's really just, this does damage, cool. Then there's the Abyss type attacks, which do extra damage to occult themed enemies. And then there are the occult based attacks that do more damage to Abyss themed enemies. The occult and the Abyss enemies don't really do bonus damage to you as far as I can tell currently. Maybe there'll be armor and stuff you get in the game that will change that, but for now, it's really only towards your damage output. It's not only the spells with these damage outputs, there are a few weapons. Like, the skeleton enemy drops a mace that does occult-based damage, and the shrimp lobster enemy drops its claw, so you can attack with that, and that's an abyss-type weapon, so it'll do more damage to the skeletons. On the note of the skeletons and the shrimp lobster things, there's not too much enemy variety outside of these 2, at least in the demo. Personally, I would have wanted to see maybe one of each type more, and maybe like a basic type enemy for like your first encounter before you get into your elemental matchups. But as it's a demo, I don't want to push too much. The first area could be completely different by the end of the development. On a note about the spells, though, they also have a mechanic called Sanity, so instead of having an MP gauge that slowly diminishes as you cast spells and then recharges like stamina, it fills up as you cast spells, and the last spell type that you cast affects this little bar on the bottom right that is kind of your sanity, from what I can tell. Once the bar fills up in either the occult or the abyss direction, you die. That's it. You're dead. Don't do that. It's to prevent you from spamming one spell type over and over and over, but unfortunately can be pretty easily bypassed by just using the other spell option. So you'd cast the Abyss spell over and over and over, and right as the sanity is about to hit its limit, cast the Bloodshot spell so it goes in the other direction if you had been using a lot of Abyss spells and had already built up a lot in that Abyss direction. Unfortunately, the enemy AI is also pretty basic, but again, demo, don't want to judge it too much. The enemy AI can be pretty easily worked with by just standing somewhere they can't reach and attacking from range. Thankfully, the counter to this is the skeletons have ranged attacks, so stand behind a wall, pop out to attack with your spell, and then go back. It just kind of makes the spells seem really overpowered, especially in this early game section. Speaking of this being an early game section, you level up really fast, and that kind of makes all of the enemies, even the big skeleton, which I only found 2 of, it makes even the big skeleton seem kind of lackluster. There wasn't a boss or anything. The closest thing I have to a boss would have been that big red skeleton guy, but generally in terms of combat, it was fairly basic but easy to get into. Any of those Soulsborne games are a lot harder to get into and have fun with, so I think this might attract an easier going audience. Outside of the combat though, the gameplay was pretty much nothing. You could jump around for a few puzzles to get from one point to another, but after that you were at that point. You get maybe an item that moves your sanity in a different direction from where it is, but outside of that, there wasn't really much benefit to exploration. I didn't really find a need to use the sedatives either, because what they do is make it so you can cast spells without having to worry about your sanity for a limited amount of time. But when I'm already not really caring about my sanity, it's not really a problem. Maybe with more powerful spells that affect your sanity differently, it'll be a completely different situation, but at least at current, with what's available, there's not too much to sort through there. When the paths do split, the game does a really good job of showing you what direction to go by having these little skeletons all around that just kind of point you in the right direction, or maybe they're like crawling towards like an item you can get, and oh, this item, there's the path I need to go right next to it. Not all the time, but they kind of gave me a good sense of the direction. Speaking of these skeletons on the ground, they are so well implemented into how you get your first broken sword in the beginning. It felt super cinematic, walking up to this skeleton in the light with a sword through its chest. And when you go to get your healing item, this game's version of an Estus flask, there's a bunch of these skeletons trying to crawl towards it, but they never actually made it, and so it's like, I'm just built different. But outside of this cinematic feel of a few different shots, it felt like someone built the world and was like, all right, here, do what you want with this. I'm done, and whoever was left to work on that just kind of filled it with enemies and a couple of items. I wouldn't be surprised if this area changes almost completely in the final product in terms of what's where. The great thing about having all these enemies, though, is that they give you XP, and you level up off of that. Unfortunately, having all of these enemies means getting XP is really easy, and you just kind of get a lot of it. I ended up, by the end of the game, having like 3 or 4 unspent levels, just because I was already strong enough to deal with everything just fine by spamming spells and sitting as far back as I wanted to, or even just walking up to them and backing up or blocking when they attacked. The leveling up itself, though, is pretty similar to Dark Souls. You get a point to spend and you put it into a stat, except instead of having a bunch of souls that buy the point, you just get points on level up. I was having some trouble with the UI in that there were a few times where it felt like there wasn't any feedback to tell me, hey, you just press this button. I would click on something and then I'd be like, is anything gonna happen? Or I let a few seconds go by and okay, game start or cinematic something or changing the menu. The only technical difficulty I ran into was on the character select because I was spending a lot of time reading the descriptions of the different character class things, and the music just kind of stopped looping, which wasn't too much of a problem. I wrapped it up pretty quick and moved along. Outside of that, the seeing distant objects being difficult was kind of the only other issue I had, and that's not really a technical issue, that's just a limitation of the visual style that they were going for. So yeah, on those gameplay mechanics, I'd give it a solid 6 out of 10, which sounds a little low, but considering that it's fairly basic, I don't want to set it too high and then kind of be like, oh yeah, that's totally perfect, there's nothing that could be improved on, because there's always something that can be improved on. I think with it being basic like this, but also a few more mechanics rolling in and some balancing with the player combat stuff, it could really pick up. The visuals are gorgeous. I can't get enough of them. I love the low poly 3D style. I sat there for a solid like 5 or 10 minutes just of my gameplay, watching the sky and just looking around slowly, trying to get some panning views where I just stare at the scenery. So I'd say for visuals, it's a good 8 out of 10. Technical issues, there was pretty much nothing wrong. 10 out of 10 there. I didn't run into anything. I did see some stuff about other players, but that's their problem, not mine. All in all, I think my biggest positives were the visuals, followed by the gameplay just being really easy to get into, despite being very basic and leaving me kind of wanting more. And hey, maybe that was the goal so that you want to play more of it when it fully releases. When the full game does release, I would really hope to see, even just in this first area, not even beyond that, I would really like to see some more enemy diversity and more puzzles and something more interesting or useful or rewarding at the end of those branching paths. So yeah, that was Pale Abyss. Thank you devs for making such a cool demo. I can tell that a lot of heart was put into this, and I can of course appreciate anyone making a game because they want to make a game and not just for profit. And if you've watched this far, thanks for staying. Hope to see you again. Leave a like and subscribe if you're cool and you like fish, because I'm a fish. That's what that